Audio is one of those issues on Call of Duty that never seems to go away, which is why there seems to be little updates for it always releasing. I do think audio across Warzone, Modern Warfare 2 and DMZ has improved in recent months, however, it's clearly not perfect in certain situations, particularly when we refer to footstep audio and hearing other enemies, as that's essentially what we mean by audio problems. I'm sure that you think the shooting and environment noises sound just fine, but the key one has always been footsteps or hearing enemies in general. Well, last week there was another audio update across Call of Duty, with patch notes saying they updated audio for opening loot caches. Okay, no big deal. But further down the patch notes, they comment that they added a new cinematic music slider, which allows players to control UI music, game intros and outros, and cinematic sequences separately from the music that happens during gameplay. Being able to separate gameplay audio and cinematic audio is actually very useful, so that's a big win for me. Then lastly, they say that there has been various refinements to footstep and occlusion mixes. Occlusion just being how audio is heard through barriers and objects, by the way. So this is the one that will improve the quality of gameplay for most players, I think, and has been a constant process of refinement and iteration seemingly. And I think you can tell the differences in certain situations. So these updates are seemingly all good news for audio. Now let's take a look at how we can take advantage of this update with our in-game settings. And we'll start right at the top with the audio mix. Now the best audio mix is dependent on your setup. Of course, if you do have a soundbar, I recommend soundbar or home theater. If you do have a larger surround sound system at home, you could even go to cinema. But for most players, they're going to be using headphones. The exact setting for you will actually depend on your headphones, because some naturally have more bassy boosts incorporated into the headset anyway, whereas others don't. For most users though, I would still recommend headphone bass boost, and that's simply because footsteps register in this low frequency range, and the bass boost setting simply enhances and increases the volume of these lower end frequencies. But if you do already have a headset which is very bassy, it's possible this can distort some of the ordinary sounds. If that is the case, you can just go back to headphones, of course. Now in terms of the breakdown for the various volumes, I've left master volume on 100 here, and that's simply because on my headset I control the master volume on there. Now if you can't do that, I do recommend turning this down a little bit. Then for gameplay music, I've put this down to 20. If you're uber competitive, you can obviously turn this all the way off, but I still like a little bit of the full sound that Call of Duty offers. For dialogue audio, I've put this down to 30. I always recommend keeping this on at least a little bit. Sometimes an enemy can be nearby without you knowing, but then their operator will shout something like, "Putting down a claymore," and then you just know someone's in the area. Effects volume, that's definitely on 100, so that is things like footsteps. Voice chat volume, obviously that's personal preference, and again, can depend on your personal settings on your headset. I've put mine down to 50, and for most people, that'll be fine. And then for cinematic music volume, again, I haven't turned this all the way off, but if you're super competitive, you can. I've just lowered mine quite a bit so I can hear more important sounds, but it's still there in the background, giving me a more full experience. Then as we move down the list, there are still a couple of important settings I want to highlight. Now obviously proxy chat can be really fun to have on, but can also give away your position, so that is very much personal preference, but I still run it. But I will say, if you do still have proxy chat on, make sure your open mic sensitivity threshold is in the right place. Often I come across players who give away their position because their mic is showing up in the game because they're breathing down it or something like that. Well, if you see that happening to you, or your teammates for that matter, I recommend turning this up. This just means that the microphone won't start transmitting the audio until it's at a higher threshold. So basically you have to be louder before it starts transmitting. So those background noises, whether it is breathing or a dog barking or a PC running, won't get picked up as much. That being said, your open mic sensitivity won't actually affect your volume of your microphone. So you can leave this on 100 and people will hear you just fine. For subtitles, I recommend keeping this on. That's for similar reasons to the dialogue volume above. Basically, you can get important information cues from the subtitles that you may not have heard. Then for mono audio, definitely have this off. I don't really know why they've got this as an option, to be honest, but by keeping it off, it ensures that you keep that directional audio so you can hear footsteps or gunfire on the left and right and you actually know where it's coming from. For reduced tinnitus sound, put this on. Not only does this just reduce an annoying sound, it does it at a time where you want to be hearing out for other audio cues as much as possible. So if you do get stunned or flashed, chances are an enemy is tracking you down, and by reducing the tinnitus sound, you have a better chance of hearing some enemy footsteps approach you. Then the rest of the settings aren't too important or are just completely subjective. I hope this audio update helps you out, and now that you are done here, why don't you check out the latest best graphic settings for Warzone 2, or you can head here and check out the best free skins you can get on Warzone 2 as well.